with Newsmax, comparing last night's 30-plus shootings to last year when we had an out-of-control race riot in which almost every member of the city of Chicago was, in fact, a victim, seems to be playing with those numbers just a little bit. Last night, I think you were on Chicago Tonight. You said that 99.9% of the criticism of you is because you're a black woman. Do you honestly believe that, considering the way the city council, the city council of Chicago is obviously made up of many black women who criticize you?
So you said about 15 things, most of which were wrong. We didn't have race riots last summer.
It was 100%.
No. You're wrong. I know you have political aspirations. I know those political aspirations haven't been fulfilled. You're a failed political candidate over and over again. But what you don't have the right to do is make up facts. We did not have race riots in our city last year. That's just wrong. And again, yeah, that's wrong. And it's incendiary. Now, I know that's what Newsmax likes to do, but I'm not going to let you take liberty with the facts, not in front of me.
So you're not going to answer my question?
I answered your question. Your question, frankly, was insulting.
Well, that didn't go very well. Want to bring in that reporter, William Kelly, to discuss the exchange. We're also joined by Dr. Darrin Porcher, retired NYPD Lieutenant and criminal justice analyst. William, I'll start with you. Look, I mean, we have to parse words. You said a race riot didn't occur. There were certainly plenty of riots and incendiary activity that was centered around race. Perhaps you wanted to make that distinction without a lot of difference. What is your perspective here?
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you for having me. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is failing the city of Chicago. There's no question about it. Since that interview, we've had 30-plus shootings. She still claims that crime is down. Okay, she's the one who went on TV and said that 99.9% of the criticism of her is based on her being a black woman. The fact of the matter is that the Chicago City Council is made up of many black women, aldermen, who are criticizing her. Not to mention the fact that the Cook County board president is a black woman, the state's attorney is a black woman, basically she can say that Newsmax is wrong. She can say that my questions are wrong. The fact of the matter is that she's just wrong on the face of it.
Now, obviously, you're entitled to your own opinions, not entitled to your own facts. It would appear the mayor needs to heed her own advice because men lie, women lie, numbers certainly do not lie. And the numbers show us that there's a great deal of pain and suffering happening in that city. And the people most deeply impacted are black people, which is why the black people who run that city are criticizing her. Do you think you're going to get an invitation back into the press room? Or were they now going to go from making up facts to censoring the press?
Well, I think my invitation was the First Amendment. I have a City of Chicago police media credential that also gives me the right to enter that press room. I will continue to press Mayor Lori Lightfoot and every other Chicago or Illinois elected official when it comes to incompetence, crime, out of corruption, whatever the case may be, the people of Chicago, the people of Illinois deserve that.
Absolutely. Obviously, when they can't beat you, they'll insult you personally. Dr. Porcher, I want to bring you in here because I want to talk about the broader issue. We've seen, obviously, the tension around communities and police. We've also seen people in charge of helping to run the police, including most recently the actual chief from Oakland, talking about the pernicious impact of this defund police movement actually hurting people's lives. Talk to us from your professional expertise about what is happening right now and how we are losing the thread in keeping people safe in their own homes.
When we speak to the defund police movement, it was something that was unfortunate for Democrats because as a result, they lost a lot of the down ballot elections. And so we look at a place like Minneapolis, Minnesota. The city council sued to defund the police. And what happened was the citizens sued the city council, and that based on the overwhelming level of violence that that community has endured. And it really set forth a precedence on a national level that this defund police movement is not something that's effective. So when we look at where this defunding of police is coming from, you mentioned Oakland, but when we look at it from a more broader perspective, we look at New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. These are cities that are controlled by democratically elected mayor. So the foundation is the same across the board. It was a great lightning bolt in connection with after the riots of George Floyd, but there was no substance to it. We need a plausible execution strategy to protect and defend the citizens in these larger cities. And when we look at the social contract, it's afforded by government through means of police. The defunding police movement is simply a colossal failure, and this is a clear reflection of Mayor Lightfoot's inability to manage her city as a result.
Now, I think most people who have a brain and understand common sense recognize that if you want to reform the police, that costs more money. If you're trying to build a bridge to that reformed future of policing, that also actually implies an infusion of cash, not cash coming out of the system. And NYPD, they're looking for about $200 million more for the department. From your perspective, Dr. Porcher, what needs to happen across this country to make sure that our efforts to reform police don't imperil the people that depend on our policing the most?
We need to remove all the democratically elected mayors, for starters. No, on a serious note, one of the things—
Chicago first.
Senator Tim Scott introduced the police reform bill that was sound. However, the Democrats looked to introduce the George Floyd Act, and there's a contention between the two. And Joe, as you mentioned, in order to reform, we need to enlist more or greater resources into that department so we can have a more qualitative construct to move forward. And Mayor de Blasio in New York City defunded the NYPD by $1 billion. Now he's standing around with egg on his face because now he's looking to introduce $200 million into policing because he was able to assess that this his method in doing it was a colossal failure. So that being said, we need to revisit, we need to retool, and we need the police and the politicians to work in tandem to ensure that the citizens are safe. I'll tell you something. The average police officer is not afraid of the criminals. They're afraid of the elected officials because it's the elected officials that will create legislation, that will create a level of hurdles into what they do and possibly even prosecute these officers. I just go back to New York City, and I'm going to end it here. The New York City, I want to say, the Manhattan District Attorney specifically dropped all of the charges against the rioters in the wake of the George Floyd protests, but continued to prosecute the officers. And that really sends the wrong message as a result.
At the end of the day, they call it Republican talking point, right-wing talking points. Those data points, those are real people that had mothers, fathers, daughters, sons that cared about them, and will never see them again because homicides are out of control across this nation. Dr. Darrin Porcher, William Kelly, God bless you both. Happy 4th of July. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.